We're streaming live.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The time is now 6:33. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome all of our visitors that's joining us remotely. Again, you can watch our meetings on the city's YouTube page and also go to the Council Live link to access that page. Madam Clerk, can you please proceed with roll call?
Mayor Gore,
Here.
Vice Mayor Bennett, Councilor Randolph,
Here.
Councilor Holloway,
Here.
Councilor Parton,
Here.
Councilor Denton,
Here.
Councilor Pelham.
Present.
Thank you. We do have a quorum present to be able to conduct the meeting this evening. For the past couple of weeks, you have been holding different work sessions going over department budgets, as well as different aspects of the city's overall operational budget. So this is the first meeting that we're having to kind of tie in all of the feedback we have heard over the past couple of weeks, and to see how far we get with trying to get closer to creating a final budget to adopt. So now is the time for the responses from Mr. Altman and staff regarding the questions we've asked thus far, and then for council to decide on some other joint items that council has brought up. So Mr. Altman.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. You've got in your packet this evening, council had asked and requested information regarding travel and service contracts and the miscellaneous line items in each budget, and what were, particularly with travel and miscellaneous items that were required or non-essential. So we requested of departments to provide us information regarding what they have as far as what they would need if they had trainings that were required for accreditation or continuing CEs for continuing education credits for their license or certifications. So the responses that we received back are in this table. So we did not do anything with council, the clerk, or the attorney's budget, Office on Youth, or any of our constitutional offices. We did not make any adjustments there. We have some room in the Department of Development. We didn't receive a response there, so we've got some additional information that we need to get for you there, along with water renewal. But I would imagine that some of that travel can be reduced as a result of where we are with not knowing COVID impacts on all the conferences that we're going to have and what other trainings. Now, I would say we have made some commitments, particularly one in the police department with regard to having a certified polygraph technician here in the city. And we've made the training itself is free, but we have to pay for the travel for the individual to Pennsylvania to do the training. But so that's the other department that didn't get any information back from, and in part of the delay in getting your information this evening. So we do apologize for that. But if you have any questions regarding the information that's on the sheet, or just want to take it in and think about it, and as we wrap this up, what y'all may want to do or may be able to do or may not be able to do with the information for if you have one more work session. The other item.
1 second, let me finish with this section, please, Mr. Altman. I have hands from Councilor Pelham, Councilor Randolph, and Councilor Denton.
Okay.
Councilor Pelham, unmute your microphone, please.
So have you finished? Well, I have a suggestion when we get through all of them, but what does essential mean? I missed that.
So we had talked about some travel that people may have to undertake for certifications or maintaining their license or any kind of, like, you have to take
Okay.
continuing education credits to maintain your license or your certification for for whatever. If, let's say, you're the city engineer and you have an engineering license, so that's what would be essential. Non-essential, obviously, is what would be the remainder that could be eliminated from the budget. There's a couple of budgets in here that I had mentioned, development PD and water renewal, that we've got to get additional information from for you to see what that number would look like. But again, we didn't look at or do anything with the councils, the clerks, or any of our constitutional office budgets. We did not make any recommendations with regard to that, and didn't suggest removing any of that travel.
Council Pelham, are you complete with the floor?
So you would actually, like in the case of Infotech, subtract 9,500 from 13,500 and get what their budget is, or you add those two together for the total budget?
So what we have is we
Oh,
can
I see, I got it.
we could
Central and
reduce it to,
non-essential.
we could reduce it to $4,000. That's what, in this case, Dr. Banker has indicated that is essential for her staff. And I believe this primarily involves Munis training. So that 13,000 could be reduced to 4, giving you a $9,500 that you could use, transfer somewhere else, or what you may want to do with it.
All right, because, well, I guess make the suggestion now is that basically, so that we don't have to determine anything in between central and non-essential, as I've suggested before, why can't we put all these line items into one line item, where it be travel budget? So when they made their budgets out, I'm sure they knew that who was going where. Annually in November, for instance, city council goes to NLC. Most conferences are annual, and they end up being, the central ones be the same place, maybe a different city, but they tend to be planned around the same time. So one line item, can you go down to the bottom? Madam Mayor, where the total for budget for travel is, what is it? That total is 453,000. Oh, I can't see.
33.
$433,259.
So that line item will be travel budget. Either put it in the city manager or the city council's budget. And as people say, for every month, so in July, if anybody know they're going away in July, they submit that request to us, and we put it as a part of our minutes and approve it as such. Same thing for the other two items. And that way we don't have to distinguish between something that's the departments deem essential or not. Everybody, we all have a look at it, and we can get used to seeing what type of usages are being budgeted for travel and the types of training that our people are getting, which will give city council more insight of what the whole city departments are doing. Hold it for later, but that's my, I know we just got this, I guess, 3 hours ago, which is, I haven't had a chance to look at it and compare it to any notes that I had, because I just got back home at 5:30. So that's the general thing that I will hope my peers will consider. One line item for budget, one line item for miscellaneous. Everybody know what they spend every month. They've been doing it for at least 10 years. All the directors, they've been here long enough to know what they should spend all that money for. So just a matter of turning in that information at the first of each month and place it on the budget for approval for spending. That's all I have right now.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Pelham. Councilor Randolph?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Mr. Altman, did you even ask the the constitutional officers at all about their travel?
I'd sent an email out to all department heads and constitutional officers requesting information from them.
And they just didn't answer?
Some did not.
Okay.
And I was not going to
Yeah.
make a suggestion on their behalf as their constitutional officer, and wasn't going to
Yeah. I got
adjust
it.
their budget.
Did I understand you to just say that the police with their $41,800 travel budget really has only one travel required?
No,
Or special? I didn't
we have-
understand what you were saying.
No, we have one that we have made a commitment to. That isn't to say that they have other that is required for officer accreditation and departmental accreditation travel related. But we do have one that we have made a commitment to prior to COVID even starting to undertake the polygraph training.
Why did your department not respond?
Why did my department? You mean why did
Police, they're under you. Why didn't they
okay,
respond to you?
I thought you were talking about the manager's office line. I was like, well, no, we did.
Yeah.
I've got to have a conversation with them to get the additional information out of those three offices that I didn't get anything from.
Yeah, I mean, we're on limited time here.
Mhm.
We're trying to finalize a budget, so really, to me, no excuse why they couldn't. If they wanted this, they should have been able to respond. I'm gonna unfortunately have to disagree with Ms. Pelham. I don't think that we need to see everybody's travel every month and approve it or not. I think that the departments that fall under the city manager, he can manage those departments. That's what he's here for. And apparently the constitutional officers don't want us to manage them anyway. But I would like something that, because I think that it does change every year. I think certainly based on where the potential of the location is, and also costs change. Certifications change based on employee turnover, things of that nature. But I do think that every year there should be a mandatory what is essential and what isn't. And I think the days of frivolous travel need to be calmed down until we get in a better position as a city for our finances. I'm disappointed to see that the only non-essential travel comes down to $27,000. Of course, I'm going to vote to get rid of all of council's travel and the city clerks, and the city attorney will have to tell us what she thinks is essential and whether it can be cut. But for ours, that, to me, that adds another $77,800. That's still not just barely $100,000. And so I'm disappointed out of a huge budget of $433,000 for travel that a fourth of it is what we consider non-essential. So, and can be done away with. I was hoping for a little more than that, but I would certainly look to the constitutional officers to help us out and trim their budget down in travel a little bit if possible, and to help us understand whether or not they absolutely have to have this. If they do, I respect that, but I would like to have an answer no later than Thursday from your departments, Mr. City Manager, that haven't answered. And again, I am in favor of cutting all of council's travel just for a year, and the city clerks for a year, just to kind of see where we're at in 6, 8, or 12 months. So that's what I have to say at this point. Thank you, and I'm done with the floor. Thank you.
You're welcome. And just for parliamentary procedure, I see Vice Mayor Bennett has joined us. Madam Clerk, did you write down the time she entered the meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Counselor Denton?
Yes, thank you. I have a question for the city manager. Can you give us any clue underwater renewal? That's $70,500. That by far is more than anybody else other than council, and that's 7 of us. But do you know what that entails?
I know that they,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I know that they have operators, the wastewater treatment operators that have license requirements. And they have continuing education with their license requirement to be a wastewater operator. So that probably factors into that number quite a bit. But we will have a breakdown of the 3 offices for y'all as to what is essential and non-essential.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Before I call on Counselor Pelham again, for the other remaining council members that haven't spoken, does anyone have any questions for this first round?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Counselor Pelham?
Mute me, okay? Again, all that essential and unessential won't be necessary. If, for instance, engineers know they have to get a certification, they normally get it in October. Why can't they send to the council in their September meeting or August meeting and say, I need to go to get my certification to be a part of our minutes? Again, we'll become educated on what kind of money we're spending on all travel by people requesting us to release the money from the general fund for them to take the money out of that lump sum. That is most efficient to me. And the constitutionals, we just take all the travel away from them as well as the other agencies that do travel. Everybody requests the money in time. That means directors and those individuals that have to go to travel, whether it's essential or not, we'll get used to knowing what type of money we're spending out for travel all over if everybody has to come back and request from that lump sum of money. And it's that simple to me. And I hope y'all can agree with that. Thank you.
Okay. So is there any other questions regarding the information we just received regarding the travel budget? I'm assuming everyone is probably thinking that we should wait to vote on stuff because we just received this packet and there's some other information that's pending. So does anyone have any other comments or questions at this time? Okay, Vice Mayor Bennett.
Yes, I do. Since we did receive this, I would like to give back the notes to the city manager to actually give us the details of what we actually do need and not vote on that tonight, I guess, because there's certain things I would like to vote on. But we can just go through this and take our notes. Well, I don't want to go through this entire night questioning things that we don't have the answer to, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, so I'm just gonna try to get clarity. I don't know if you were on when, I don't think you were on when Councilor Pelham noted that we just got our packet about 3 hours ago. And then also Mr. Altman's remarks, he shared that there's at least 3 departments that haven't responded when Councilor Randolph asked him, and then the constitutional offices have not responded. He's waiting for that information. And so since we just got this packet and there's other items in there that require discussion, since we're just not getting the answers back to the initial questions, I thought we were just doing a presentation to make sure that what he provided us was sufficient. Is that along the lines of what you're asking?
is efficient I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, is efficient for what?
For council, because this session, this is supposed to be the session, from my understanding, where Mr. Altman is bringing back to council the answers to a lot of the questions that we have been asking. And so when we get to a section, if the information is sufficient and council chooses to, we could take action, but if it's not sufficient, it can be considered as a presentation because we just received this packet 33 hours ago. And
Yes,
so
ma'am.
most of us haven't had a chance to review it and digest the information. And so I think when Mr. Altman started, he said, you know, maybe we can just digest this. So that's what I was under the impression of. If someone sees something that they want to take action on, certainly they can make a motion, but for the most part, I thought this would be a presentation.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. I understand. Thank you.
Is that the lines you were thinking?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Thank
Okay,
you.
good. No problem. Great. Councilor Randolph?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I agree. I got off work at 5. I had printed this up and I spent the last hour and a half looking this over. So I'm probably prepared, but I understand a lot of us might not be. And this is disappointing to me that, you know, it was so late in getting to us. I understand the problems, but we do have some things that I think we can vote on. The city manager is not going to come back and tell us anything about city council's budget or the clerk's budget. So I feel that we can take that into consideration. We've been through our budget. We've all said what we had to say. And with that in mind, I'd like to make a motion to for council to consider all travel for the city council's budget and the city clerk's budget to be zeroed out for 1 year. And I think that we have enough information and enough wherewithal that we could vote on that. So my motion is for city council's travel and the city clerk's budget's travel to be taken away so that there is zero in those line items for the upcoming budget.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Randolph, seconded by Councilor Denton. It's now before council for discussion. Councilor Pelham?
Yes, I would like to make a substitute motion that states that instead of separating or making a motion for one particular department, make that decision as a whole by putting all travel into one lump sum under the line item for city council. And once everyone knows the money that they need monthly, that they present it to us in a timely manner so that it can be approved and processed so they can go to each individual travel, including the constitutional officers and people who did not respond to this request. No one would have a travel line in any of the departments.
Second. So this is a request to be able to make a substitute motion.
Yeah.
Up for discussion. And I don't know if that hand is up for her
Nope, it's not.
comments.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. So right now the motion on the floor is to allow Councilor Pelham to make a substitute motion. Roll call, please.
Mayor Gore,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Bennett,
No.
Councilor Randolph,
Wow.
No.
Councilor Holloway,
Yes.
Councilor Parton,
No.
Councilor Denton,
No.
Councilor Pelham.
Yes.
Okay, motion fails. So the motion on the floor is to zero out city council's travel budget and the clerk's travel budget for this upcoming year. So we're back into discussion. I don't see any hands raised right now. I do have comments, but I'll check for those who are on the phone. And if you don't have anything, it's fine to remain silent. If you have something to say, then you can share. Does anyone on the phone have any comments? Okay. So the only comment I would share is regarding this. When council last met at our last work session, I did a poll I wrote down what everyone's feedback was, and there was common ground to not completely zero out council's budget. There is common ground to keep certain aspects so we can participate in remote educational opportunities that may have costs. So that's my concern there. And then also my concern is, again, for mileage, if we do attend something that is nearby that we can drive to, that wouldn't be able to be reimbursed like the other departments in the city. The other update I will provide is the National League of Cities. We had our day one of our leaderships conference for members who serve on leadership boards within the organization. I'm on the advisory committee for NLC. And we were updated that right now, obviously, we're going to be doing virtual events, but they have not decided on what that looks like in November. It could be in person, it could be virtual. They're still playing it by ear. VML has also not provided any updates about how they're going to do their continuing education right now. So I would just be cautious about completely even zeroing out mileage, because if there is a continuing opportunity to, continuing education opportunity to learn about more federal resources for COVID-19, more resources for workforce development, or some of these critical things that are impacting cities, we wouldn't have it in our budget. So again, when we last spoke, there was common ground to keep certain aspects of council's travel so we can at least temporarily participate remotely if there was cost for that. And the second point I would raise is for the clerk's office. We right now have an interim clerk who is new to this position. She certainly needs to attend training to train on the job, but then also we're looking at hiring someone who is certified, but in the event that that may not occur, we still have to train the deputy clerk. Part of the deputy clerk position, just like the assistant city manager, is to participate in professional development organizations. So zeroing out that line item would also potentially prevent her from attending virtual trainings to learn more about the job. And I think that that's certainly needed in the clerk's office to make sure we have trained staff to be working in there, especially at this time. So I would just advise against, caution against that. And I would like my comments to be on the record for this portion as well.
And mine as well.
Yes, ma'am, that's approved. There are no other hands raised at this time. Just want to make sure I double check. Is anyone joining by phone have anything to add? If you don't, it's fine to remain silent.
I just want to say can you hear me?
I'm sorry, who is this?
Hi, this is Joan Gosier. I just wanted to know, I did turn in my material, so I don't know if that was maybe not received. I just wanted to let it be known for the record that I did submit my information for travel, miscellaneous, etc.
This meeting.
Okay, thank you. And I see that you're joining via the audio. I don't know if you're in the app software. If you are, can you please just try to use like the chat or another function to let me know that you need to be recognized so we don't have people jumping out, but we'll definitely make sure that's annotated in the minutes as well for Mr. Altman. Okay, roll call, please.
Mayor Gore,
No.
Vice Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Counselor Randolph,
Yes.
Counselor Holloway,
No.
Counselor Parton,
Yes.
Counselor Denton,
Yes,
Counselor Pelham.
No.
Okay, motion passes. So in the interim, we'll be waiting for the other information to be provided to city council. So that way we can make an informed decision regarding travel. And we're going to go to the next section of the presentation. Miscellaneous, Mr. Altman.
Yes, ma'am. So again, here, council had requested information throughout the budget process because we have several line items in the budget that are tagged as miscellaneous, and they actually have real expense behind them to go towards something. Again, here, we did not make any attempt to address council or the city attorney's budget. But what we found, and I think you can remember, a lot of the miscellaneous expense that are in departmental budgets are actually expenses. And I'll just pull out the code item at $40,000. That is to cut grass and demo buildings. But it's coded as miscellaneous, and we're working, as we made that commitment to council, we'll be working to make sure all of these miscellaneous expenses don't show up as miscellaneous expenses next year. They're actually coded to a line item. But unfortunately, what we have is economic development can be reduced by 15,000, but most of the other, and we have behind this item, the departments that responded, we have information with regard to what those travel and miscellaneous expenses relate to behind this sheet here. And again, we'll be looking at those items that y'all can review. And certainly I would say take the time to look at each of those items and have questions, either forward them to me or we can discuss it Thursday evening, given the lateness of the packet this evening. But that's the information that we have thus far with regard to what would be essential or non-essential. And again, I think we asked this question of almost every department when we went through the budget process, and I could go back and look at my notes. But based on those discussions, this is where we are. Not a whole lot of money there in miscellaneous that could be reduced out of the budget at this point in time.
Thank you, Mr. Altman. Just for a point of clarity, because I got the chart that I have on the screen this is just for miscellaneous budget. The budget line items for miscellaneous, that's in department's budget, correct?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, you faded out.
I said, this is just for the line item miscellaneous that appears in certain departments' budgets, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
And you're still waiting on some departments to respond back and give you additional information, correct?
We have a couple, but I think in this instance, just pulling out code, we know what those funds are for. While they may not have provided that in writing, we do know that that's for grass cutting and building demolition. Okay. When we brought those funds over from capital to put it in operating. But okay. We'll check with the other the departments to ensure that we've got a response. But behind this table are pages of the explanation from the departments that we received information from. Okay. And I'll certainly go back and find Ms. Gautier's email and provide that to council.
Thank you for that clarity. Thank you. Councilor Collins?
You call my name?
Yes, you have your hand raised.
Yeah. Again, I'd like to, council is always talking about transparency and they want to know things. I understand why you don't want to be allowing the departments to be transparent as well to the council to know what's going on. So I'll make the same motion that even though, for instance, code says $40,000 in grass cutting, fine. So then every month they can come to us and say, place the money for grass cutting. So no other money for code was used for nothing else but grass cutting. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Martin?
The money that's there is for grass cutting and building demo, and we pay vendors every month during grass season to cut the grass. So that's
my thing. So in February or January, she will she will submit to council in January. Grass cutting season starts in March. I need $40,000. Council will release that money. And then at the end of the process, when we're doing now, we'll see how much money has been expended. But again, that's just an example of us knowing exactly what she spent for miscellaneous versus grass cutting and you said something else. Just
Building demolition. And that's what all of those funds are for.
I know that's what you're saying, but that's my examples I'm using. We will know for sure that's what she's using it for. To get the council familiar with what departments are spending miscellaneous for. And again, you said you will renumber that for next year. That will remind you all to do just that. So council evidently doesn't want to know. It makes maybe too much sense to me and the citizen to keeping track with the citizens' money. So I'll take the time to make the motion again and say that I would think all this money would for miscellaneous. It doesn't have to be divided by essential or non-essential. Put it in one budget item. The department heads know when they need it. They call us, all of them, and let us, put in a petition to the council to release the money upon the need. And we don't have to worry about whether it's essential or non, and we can approve it at that time. For the $1 million, how much $1 million together? 1.3 million or 1.1? What's the total of those two items?
It's $587,977 total.
No,
The total, the first column is the total amount of money.
okay. So 587,977 be placed in one budget item called miscellaneous account. And at the beginning of every month or whatever is convenient for the departments, they will request before council to release that money for and tell us what the expenditure is. That's a motion. Tax request.
I second it for discussion. Motion's made by Councilor Pelham, seconded by Mayor Gore for discussion purposes. Your hand is still raised, Councilor Pelham. Did you want to continue or are you done with the floor?
I want to continue this, for instance, for the public to know. In miscellaneous, the large items are water renewal has 338,000, might be a 5, I can't see. For miscellaneous monies, refuge garbage has $62,894. Code has 40,000. We know what that's for. Engineering has 2,900. Fire has $10,800. Police have 12,200. Circuit Court has $41,500 for one lawyer, one circuit court lawyer. He spends $41,500 every year for miscellaneous. Treasurer has 5. Commissioner Revenue has 10. Economic Development has 25. And of course, City Council had 15. So that's a lot of money for no nomenclature behind it.
Hey, Councilor Pelham,
Finished
stay
now.
with the floor. Okay, Councilor Randolph.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Again, I'm gonna unfortunately disagree with Ms. Pelham. It's not that I don't want to know what these things are. We've been given pretty much a review in our hands that tells us what they do with the money. They sat in a line by line item discussion and talked to you about where the miscellaneous is. We've talked to Mr. Altman. He is the manager of most of these departments, and he is the person that, brings the budget together to us. And we looked at it in detail this year about where they spend what. We are not going to be looking at miscellaneous to the extent that we had to this year, because we have requested our city manager and our finance director to take these miscellaneous items and put them into line items so that grass cutting becomes part of the budget, that Ms. Griffin has to put her money into, and we know what money she's using by monthly reports on, if we ask for them and get them, which we do, from Mr. Terry about how much and where we're at with the budget. So that gives us a scope of how much money is being spent on what, as long as we take away these miscellaneous, which is what we talked about for numerous weeks about not liking. You were very strong on not liking miscellaneous, Ms. Pelham, and I 100% agreed with you. We could not tell what that stuff was, but with the line items supposedly taking away all of these miscellaneous funds, which the city manager, Mr. City Manager, you've agreed that you and Mr. Terry will be doing this, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we should not have departments that have any lumps of money in miscellaneous for the future. It should all be named line items unless something is not going to go as planned. But I don't see a need for us to approve it for each department each month if they need it. I think this is what the budget at the first of the year is for. If there are funds that need to be used above and beyond what was originally budgeted, then yes, they have to come back to us and ask for more money. And we will then at that time ask them why. But as long as we've gone through this process, I feel like we have an answer for miscellaneous, and that is to do away with it with line items so that we won't be looking at the same issue next year. So I have to unfortunately vote no for Ms. Pelham's suggested motion. Thank you. I'm done with the floor.
Okay. I have a comment, but before I speak, I see no hands raised. Those joining by phone. Okay. The only thing I would share is I did second this for discussion purposes, mostly because we have been discussing the budget for weeks. And I'm just going to make one point just as a reference, not to debate it. You know, we ended our last work session with council unanimously, all 7 of us agreeing, or all of us that were present, to agree to keep conferences and convention in the budget so that way we could attend virtual events. That has changed from this week, from last week to this week, where now I guess the majority want to undo it. We've made some agreements along the way, and I don't really have the reassurances at this point that we'll collectively stick to what we said we agreed on. So I think, you know, we did ask, if the Councilor Randolph is correct, we did ask for the miscellaneous to be broken out appropriately. And Councilor Pelham, Councilor Holloway, and Councilor Denton knows we've asked for this budget after budget. And for whatever reason, whether it be the software or just time, it has never changed. So I think if we're going to support what we agreed to, then why don't we vote to release miscellaneous once we see that the budget itself has been adjusted in Munis to accurately reflect the line items that Councilor Randolph just spoke about, as opposed to, again, doing it on good faith. Let's vote to say we want to have it done, and we'll release the funding once it is completed. I can't make motions, but I'm making that suggestion.
Motions are on the floor.
I know, that's why we're talking during discussion. Okay, there's no other comments. Councilor Pelham?
I would beg and plead with the council, please vote for that so you can learn more about the budget, where your money is going. If we don't do this, then we'll learn no more. All that questioning and getting answers will not happen, because people gonna go back and gravitate to what they're comfortable with. I would like to know what $41,000 is spent by one lawyer in the circuit court. What in miscellaneous you spend every year for the last 2 years, $41,000. Why you don't want to know that, I don't know in advance. That don't make sense to me. But again, I'm petitioning counselors to at least put miscellaneous in all one bucket so that we can look at it and then it can be converted to that individual line item. Please. Thank you.
I have a point of information for the city attorney. Ms. Robinson, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. If council wanted to ensure that we have the line items broken out as we state that we wanted to, do we have to explicitly vote on that to ensure that it's like that in the budget, or do we have to just say that we hope it's going to get done and check on it later? Is there a way that we can try to make that official as a directive?
Yeah, I don't think your directives
You know what?
really have to be the vote. If you anticipate or you see from either the response, or you can discern from the response, if we were able to look and inspect sort of visual cues, if you could see from the others that you might want to ask for a general consensus. If you can see that would be acceptable, you could do it by that. A vote, of course, sort of nails it down and leaves nothing left for misinterpretation. But generally speaking, a simple reference that we would like the budget to appear in this form next year would be sufficient. And I think it only needs to be reduced to a vote if there is maybe not agreement in total for the specific suggestion. I will defer to Mr. City Manager as well to inform as to whether or not he needs a vote in order to comply with what he is hearing as the preference of the council for the formatting of the budget.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. And I'll just point, it's really not about, just for clarity, I'm asking this for council because there seems to be a difference of opinion, and I'm trying to see if there's common ground, if there's a concern about how miscellaneous money is going to be spent, and then there's another side that feels confined with it, with the understanding that there's going to be line items, maybe we can meet in the middle and ensure that that's done, and maybe there could be some comfort on both sides. That's why I'm just suggesting this to try to smooth some of this over, but that's the only reason why I'm asking. Thank you.
Whoops. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. Councillor Denton was next, then Vice Mayor Bennett.
Yes, I understand that we all have different opinions, but we just spent over a month going over every department's budget. And I know Councilor Pelham was very concerned about the miscellaneous line and asked every director to break it out for us, and they did. And then we have requested that these items, if at all possible, through finance, be made into a line item so that when we get this budget, we will see exactly where these funds are going. The budget is available to every citizen in this town. So if anybody wanted to know exactly how it's broken down, they can look at the budget, but I just can't see lumping everything together and going through it each month. I just think that's a lot of extra work, and the city manager is our CEO for the city, and it's his decision as to how he wants this budget. He brought it to us in this form. I'm satisfied with it. So I'm sorry, I just can't support Ms. Councilor Pelham's motion. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councilor Randolph. Vice Mayor Bennett's next.
That was Councilor Denton.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Councilor Denton. Vice Mayor Bennett.
Yes. Mayor Gore, you had a recommendation. What was your recommendation?
Well, my recommendation was to solidify what council said when we had the work sessions, which is to ensure that the miscellaneous is broken out in each department. So that way we can see it is going to grass cutting. We can see it is going to whatever the explanation is that staff gave us. When we had the meetings, Parks and Recreation, for example, shared that he just puts it there because he doesn't have another line item. Several departments shared that information. And so I think part of the, in my opinion, just as an observation, part of the nervousness is the fact that we really don't see where the large pots of money are going to, because it's just lumped into one line. And so my suggestion was to put it to a vote to direct the finance department to ensure that when this budget is released, that miscellaneous is broken out in each department appropriately, and the money is divided up where it needs to go, so that it's clear and transparent as to what is spending on what. And I feel like that would meet Councillor Pelham in the middle with some of her concerns, but I'm not trying to speak for her. But I do think that we need to make that official as opposed to saying if possible.
And I do remember that, thank you, Madam Mayor. I do remember that conversation, but I also remember that the, if I am not mistaken, Mr. City Manager, Mr. Altman, you and Mr. Terry are working on that currently.
Yes, ma'am. That's one of the things that we want to eliminate is miscellaneous, because we don't, I mean, I personally don't like it because it makes it look not as transparent. So we need to make sure that we have line items that effectively reflect what the funding is being spent on. And some of those line items that we're dealing with now, we've inherited as a result of the switch from gyms to munis. I know in some of our discussion during the budget, some departments mentioned that when we were in the gym system, that they actually had a line item for an issue. And then when we went to munis, it just became a miscellaneous line item. So those are the things that we have to work on correcting for the next, looking at, get the budget adopted, and then work towards correcting those items and having our budget analysts work with each department to create line items that are reflective of the expenditure itself. And Mr. Terry is available. I know that he had mentioned to me that he'd like to make a comment if he could.
Hello, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, all righty. Good afternoon or good evening, Council. Two items I think it would be helpful. First, I'd like to address Mrs. Pelham's concern. We, at the last meeting, I believe the city manager forwarded to council a response on the $41,500 for the circuit court that was in the packet last time given to you, but I think it's also in this packet, and I think it's in the back according to the agenda listing number 56, but I'll just read it. It says that the $41,500 of miscellaneous expense, what are the costs associated with this circuit court? The city pays Greenville County for our portion of the circuit court secretary salary and fringe benefits, roughly $10,500 annually. Secondly, the city pays Prince George for our portion of the court's administrator salary and fringe benefits, roughly $31,000 annually. So that should help Mrs. Pelham at least get started on how those numbers are arriving. The second item was the comment that the city manager just made. I think that you all are very knowledgeable about the transition from the older system to the new system. And basically, this is a legacy issue in terms of the code being used. Each year, we ask departments to identify the object codes that they want to use, or if it's not there, to come back to us. And I think some departments even shared with council that they just had not done that. What I'm hearing, and if the city manager understands that what I'm saying is what we summarized and I talked about, is that council votes on the items that are quote unquote listed on the sheet as miscellaneous, as itemized out. What I would like to say to council with the city manager's approval is that we will load it to an object code that defines what it is. In other words, you will not see a miscellaneous code for grass cutting. You'll either see a code that says cut weeds, cut grass, or you'll see something, but you will not see miscellaneous. In other words, once you have given us the understanding for the dollar amount, we will go back to the departments, because we do know some departments just didn't take the time, or they didn't have the time. They know what they wanted and they didn't do it. We will make sure that that happens. And then that way, the official budget will show July 1 or July 2 or whatever it is when we load it, what is
So-
on that line item.
Right.
And
I'm
that's
sorry,
what we,
Terry. Excuse me, Mr. Terry. Thank you so much. I think that what you're talking about goes between you and the department. All council
Okay.
wants to see is that line item, and we want it broken down. And to determine how the amounts, we don't determine how much is used for grass cutting, or that comes from the departments. They know how much they spend and how much is needed for that area. So if you can just work with the departments and create that line item, we just want to get rid of miscellaneous, and we want to see instead of the miscellaneous, we want that coded as whatever it is. Hey, grass cutting, painting, whatever goes on between that has something, you guys work through that. We just want it reflected in the munis, okay? But thank
yes,
you for
ma'am.
your time. I appreciate it, and that's all I needed to ask.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a point of information for Mr. Terry, just while you're on the line, so I can get clarity, because I think that's exactly what I just asked for when I asked for a motion to be made to support that very same thing. So, and you said that GEMS is a legacy issue, because I think we switched over from Munis to GEMS in 2014. And so these are the same codes from 2014 that need to be corrected. So if you're able to do like what you just mentioned, by being able to make sure the code matches correctly in the system, you can break out miscellaneous then correct for the next budget, correct?
No, that's not what I'm saying, Mayor.
That's any point of
and I-
clarification for.
Yeah, clarification. You can look at my account and you can tell when I took over, I didn't use miscellaneous. I come from, you just don't use miscellaneous. If you can't identify, then don't put it in there. I'm saying to you that we will eliminate it. You won't see it at all. You will see whatever the specific item that Vice Mayor Bennett asked for, whatever we come up with, that'll be what you will see.
Okay, so that is the same thing. So
No.
yeah, that's right. Am I wrong? That is what I was asking
Mhm.
for. Instead of taking,
Yeah.
is that Councilor Randolph?
Yep, that's exactly what you were asking for.
Okay, thank you. So now we know that it can be done. And so if you can do that, can we make sure that there's a reassurance that that gets done? Because the reason why I'm stressing this is because council before has asked this year after year, and we're still getting miscellaneous. And that's why I'm saying if I hear collectively, like I kind of heard today with minus a few other counselors, that is the direction that council wants to go, why can't we ensure that that is done by making sure it's a directive as opposed to next year? And I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to be insulting, but let's say it comes back and we say, well, directors didn't get a chance to get to it. They never gave us the information. We never got it done. That's what I'm trying to ensure that we don't do again. So thank you, Councilor Randolph, for making sure I was not, that I was understanding correctly. But if there's a way we can do that, then that's what we should do if we're all in consensus for it. Councilor Randolph has her hand raised, and then Councilor Pelham.
So what I think I heard Mr. Terry say was that during this budget session, in other words, by the time the official budget for 2021 is put out in the first week or two of July, the line items for miscellaneous will have been taken care of and will not appear on that budget. And in fact, the money that is under the miscellaneous will be in specific line items for whatever that money was budgeted for. Is that correct, Mr. Terry?
That is correct, ma'am. That is
Okay.
correct.
So I don't know that we need to make a motion, but we have clarified, and our official budget in the next 3 weeks will not include any miscellaneous going forward. So I think that, for me, resolves the issue. And we certainly are not going to be disappointed by anybody, department or finance, telling us that they couldn't get to it. Correct, Mr. Terry?
Correct. Again, I just want to make it very clear. As long as I'm hearing what I'm hearing, and I've had a conversation with city manager, I do not like miscellaneous. And so I will be getting with my staff, and even with IT, if we have to, we will eliminate that code, period.
Okay. So we don't like miscellaneous either. And we all, I think, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I am 100% behind miscellaneous disappearing from this budget, so that the clarity for us, for the citizens, and for the departments to know where their money lies and what it's for is clear to everybody. So that's the expectation, Mr. City Manager and Mr. Terry. I'm done.
Counselor Pelham, I'm sorry, Ms.
Well-
Robinson has, I'm sorry, city attorney has her hand raised. Ms. Robinson?
Yes, Mayor Gore. I am actually seeking some clarity on the discussion. And my initial understanding from Mr. Terry's contribution was that we would not break out miscellaneous for the FY21 budget, but that would be done for the following budget, the FY22. Now, after a comment or comments from Counselor Pelham, excuse me, Counselor Randolph, what I'm understanding now is that the game plan is to break out miscellaneous into specific budget lines sometime in July.
That's same.
And so I'm trying to figure out which of those two messages is the correct message.
Mr. Terry?
Madam Attorney and Counsel, let me clarify, and I apologize if it did not come across. I was not talking about FY22. I was not talking about any future. My point of reference is the budget that you're looking at now, the proposed budget for FY21. We will eliminate, there won't be a categorization. You won't see miscellaneous and then underneath of it some items. We will eliminate it, and we will identify with the departments what was supposed to be or what you needed that code to say, so that when the budgets are actually sent out to you fresh in the first few weeks or so of July, you just will not, the code may be there as a zero because that's the history of Munis, but it will no longer have any more accountability to it. And that's for this budget 21.
Okay, so Mayor Gore, if I may then, I would like to just put this out there for council's purposes primarily.
Yes, ma'am, because this is the item I really wanted to have clarity on, so please.
And when you adopt the budget, you're going to probably adopt an appropriations ordinance or resolution at about the same time. And when you pass that appropriations resolution, the budget as it has been adopted, those line items are going to be likewise funded through the appropriations. If you're funding miscellaneous, we can't then back miscellaneous out.
I'm sorry, excuse me. Is anybody else hearing like a computer beep in the background?
It's
Yes,
like
ma'am.
a code thing or something.
I thought it was my phone, my computer going crazy. Okay, so want to make sure it wasn't me. So, I don't know whose that was, but please stop clicking while Ms. Robinson is speaking unless that is Ms. Robinson's computer. Go ahead, Ms. Robinson.
Well, the point I'm making is if you adopt the budget with the miscellaneous line item and you appropriate for that line item, it can't subsequently be backed out to different budget lines and then be those budget lines funded. So whatever changes that they are anticipating making, I think it has to be done before council at least passes the appropriations resolution, because those line items that just don't exist at this moment won't be funded.
Exactly.
Thank you for saying, because that's what I was trying to ask.
And
That's
I have the floor
because,
next. Not
one
you.
second, because she asked a question. I see you, Councilor Pelham. That is why, when I asked for the point of information, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. That is why I was asking, do we need to take action on that? Because we need to see those numbers back before us. We can't just say, well, staff, you guys know what you pay for. You put the money wherever it goes, because that's not us approving the budget. So
I was misunderstood that question. I thought you were talking about for preparing the next year's budget. So
no, I appreciate it, because this is what I was trying to get at. So I'm very happy that we're back at this point. So thank you, Ms. Robinson, for speaking up. So that does go back to council. If that is, again, our intention, then Ms. Robinson, if I'm incorrect, Mr. Terry will have to come back to us with these miscellaneous broke out, how he plans to do it for us to adopt that in the budget, correct? Ms. Robinson?
To appropriate or fund those new budget lines. So it might just be moving the monies from miscellaneous to those new budget line items, but that would have to be done. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Mayor, could I? So we do not adopt a line item budget. We adopt a fund budget, and we adopt a budget that and the resolution includes the total amount funding for each department. We don't adopt a budget based on line items.
But
So
the
we
total
can,
budget is based on line items.
we present it to you in a line item form, but we do not adopt the budget resolution is not by line item. So that allows us to then take that what is miscellaneous and move it into an object coded line item after the budget is adopted. We can't increase the budget. You're just moving money from one line to another.
Can't do that.
Yes, you
Can.
Yeah, you can.
I think that's what's trying to be avoided. But Ms. Robinson, I'll just wait. I'll go defer back to council for them to ask questions of either Ms. Robinson or Mr. Altman. Ms. Pelham Councilor Pelham has her hand raised, and Councilor Denton, then Vice Mayor Bennett.
Yeah, that's my problem with whatever y'all saying. There's no way in 2 weeks, Mr. Terry is gonna get with every department. I got the impression it was gonna be fiscal year 22 when each thing is actually itemized out. That's why I was suggesting to put everything into one budget item called miscellaneous, to get familiar with what departments are spending it for next fiscal year, to get it aligned up with all these extra names of things. But if you're committing to doing that in 2 weeks, by the time we sign the budget I guess was vote on the budget on the 23rd, then we need to make a motion to make sure that it happened, to hold not Mr. Terry accountable directly, but Mr. City Manager. The directives that we give as councilors go to Mr. City Manager, not to Mr. Terry, because he contracts. Even though he contracts with the city, he's under the auspices, if y'all always say, of the city manager, which means he's really under city council as well. So no, but Mr. Cherry just made the comment that it will be in the fiscal year budget that we're going to adopt this month and identify all those miscellaneous items. Then I have no problem with it. But I don't think that's what they're saying. I don't know what words y'all using them to get out of it.
So,
But there's no way that you gonna tell me in plain words.
Ms. Pelham, in plain words,
Yes,
what Mr. Terry said was he didn't say that it would be done on the 23rd.
I know, that's what I
That
know.
When the budget was adopted and then it's loaded into the system, into Munis, the miscellaneous would go away and those dollar amounts would be loaded into object coded line items.
What's object dotted line item?
Let's just use code, which is what we use that. The line item would say grass cutting or grass cutting demolition, $40,000.
No, it has to be separate because grass cutting is different from demolition.
Well, I'm just using it as an example.
Okay.
So that's what the object code would give it a name as to what it is, as opposed to it being miscellaneous. And with due
No, you
respect,
can't just name it grass cutting demolition because all you've done is just substituted miscellaneous for two different names. It has to specify what you're spending the actual dollars for. That's what
again,
I'm
it was
telling
just,
you, and I just don't see how
again,
you're
it
gonna
was
do
just
that
an
in 2
example.
weeks.
No,
No way y'all gonna do that.
it's not.
Counselor Parliament, Mr. Altman, I think that you guys are talking over each other.
Mhm.
And Counselor Parliament, if you can let Mr. Altman just finish his sentence and then.
Well,
go back to
I
him
thought I
and-
had it for.
No, you do have the floor, but he was finishing the sentence. I think part of the confusion is he's not able to explain it in full. So, and if I can try to give you one point of clarity, if I'm understanding Mr. Altman and Mr. Terry correctly, I'm getting away from the grass cutting because that seems to be not a good example. Let's go with the government affairs is $3,000. Instead of saying miscellaneous $3,000, miscellaneous would be completely removed and he'll have ads $1,500, food $1,500. Like it'll literally say what they plan to spend that money for in the budget, and you will not see miscellaneous anymore. And if that's still not right or what you're thinking, Councilor Pelham, please correct all of us. But when you ask Mr. Altman, just let him be able to answer it in full for you so we can make sure we get your answers for you.
So no, I think, Madam Mayor, you captured it appropriately. So grass cutting would be $40,000. That's, and if I remember correctly, in gyms, it actually said it was coded as section 18.2 violations, if I remember correctly, because that was the section of the code section that dealt with tall grass, weeds, trash, and debris. So that's how it was coded. So we would code it similarly to that going in when we load the budget. It wouldn't be done prior to the budget adoption, but when we load the budget into Munis for the next fiscal year, that's when we're talking about eliminating the miscellaneous and putting the dollar amounts into object code line items.
Councilor Pelham.
Yeah, well, what is zero out mean, Mr. Terry? Again, you gonna zero out miscellaneous?
Council Pelham, it was a term that I was just using generically. In other words, what I'm saying is I was trying to give council the comfort level that we will no longer utilize the miscellaneous object code going into the fiscal year. Just won't use it.
Okay, there's something in the budget terminology for the overall budget that says that if you renumber all of these names from miscellaneous to whatever, that you all can interchange the budget, say from demolition to office supplies. Would that still be going on as well? Not you, but Mr. City Manager?
Councilor Pelham, if you don't mind, can I let the attorney interject because she has the comment regarding this, and I think it points back to her original remarks earlier. Ms. Robinson?
Madam Mayor, I can wait until Councilor Pelham finishes her.
That was a question.
Okay,
You
so
transfer monies in between and play that game as well?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, you in charge?
Departments have the ability to transfer funds within their line item budget, except for they cannot transfer any funding from salary or benefits down. They can transfer money from office supply line item to postage if they need to, because they run short on postage. I wouldn't call it playing a game. They manage their budget during the year as to what arises at the time. So if we have a lot of rezoning cases that come in development and they are running short on postage because we're required to notify adjoining property owners, we may have to move money. Ms. Griffin may have to move money from a line item into postage to cover that overage because of an unanticipated cost during the year. That we do allow that. That's why we adopt our budget. We adopt by fund. not by line item.
Ms. Robinson, did you have your comments?
Well, yes, and it's on the last comment of the city managers that I want to sort of bootstrap my comments, because when you stated earlier that you don't adopt a line item budget, it's not a practice with which I'm familiar, number one, but number two, you've got section 15.22503 and 2504 of the state code that suggests that the budget should be a little bit more detailed than what was shared. Specifically in 15.2-2504, it says what the budget should show. And the language is this: opposite each item of the contemplated expenditures of the budget shall show in separate parallel columns the aggregate amount appropriated during the preceding fiscal year, the amount expended during that year, and the aggregate amount appropriated and expected to be appropriated during the current fiscal year. And it says opposite each item.
Excuse me, Ms. Robinson, which section of code is that?
15.22504. Now, that, I mean, it goes on in detail and lays out what else is needed to be shown in the budget. But if you go back up to 15.22503, the second paragraph begins with: the governing body shall prepare and approve a budget for informative and fiscal planning purposes only, comma, containing a complete, itemized, and classified plan of all contemplated expenditures and all estimated revenues and borrowings for the locality for the ensuing fiscal year. And I think all the language around having complete itemized listings of expenditures or contemplated expenditures really does require something greater than what I'm understanding, and it would be more in line with adopting a budget with line item expenditures, which then falls back to the earlier point I was trying to make. If we start out adopting a budget that says miscellaneous, then that's the expenditure until it is changed officially by council through an appropriation and a renaming, if you will. But those things I don't think can be handled administratively. And I might be misunderstanding what was explained, but it just seems to be a gap between the language of the code and what I've seen in other settings relative to the budget. So those are my comments, and I'll conclude them. Thank you.
Okay, and I have the code section on the screen for council to view. If I have it correct, please let me know. And there's other hands raised. So if this is not correct, just message me and I'll correct it, or just let me know. Councilor Pelham still had the floor, but I think she said that was her last question for right now. If I'm incorrect, let me know, because we have Councilor Denton, Councilor Vice Mayor Bennett, Councilor Randolph, and then Mr. Altman has his hand raised as well.
Thank you, but never mind. Go ahead. Never mind.
Okay.
I type what I want. You can read it.
You want me to read it?
No, I say I type what I want to say. Y'all can read it.
Okay, I think you should state it later on, just for transparency, because we're still doing this via Zoom software. I'll let the others speak first.
Ms. Brown, everything I said tonight, please put it in the minutes.
He still has to get approved by the chair. As what I'm saying is let the others speak first and go back to it. Mr. Altman, you had your hand raised, correct?
That was from previous.
Okay. Councilor Denton. Ma'am, your microphone is muted.
probably talking away.
Okay, Counselor Denton, I'll come back to you. Vice Mayor Bennett?
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Bennett, you muted yourself again?
First, I would. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I just wanted to make clear, when I mentioned that it was the determination for the staff to figure the amount that would go into each line item as far as, let's just say, the demolition, the tree removal, or the street sweeper, it's because they would know. That would be in miscellaneous, not say, hey, you figure it out and put it in there and we'll just approve it. They know that. I don't know how much the cost or what they use to do a street sweeper, to do demolition. We on council don't know what it takes day-to-day basis. So I just want to make that clear. Like, I wasn't saying for staff to determine whatever they needed just to throw it in there on a line item. It was more of a, hey, informational way to say, break everything down in your miscellaneous, put it in that line item that you usually use. And, you know, for instance, let's say street sweeper, you use 1,500, you need that in a line item, and go from there. You know, if it becomes more or you don't have, you have to just eyeball it, use the figures that you used before. So I wanted to make that clear across the board, not saying that, you know, they determine what they need and tell us and we'll approve it. Please, if that would be okay for Madam Mayor, if you would allow the clerk to make sure that is noted.
Yes, ma'am. It can be added to the record.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Counselor Denton. Are you back with us now?
Just didn't realize I was muted. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I know.
Talking away.
I'm just not used to all this. But anyway, what I'm seeing, I think if I understand the city manager correctly, and please interrupt me if I'm getting astray, but what you have up on the screen now, what the budget to show, that is what we have been looking at for the last month and a half, is the budget, line by line, with current year, the whole 9 yards, all the information we need. But when we adopt the budget, we hope we've got to do it next Tuesday night. So it'll be ready by July 1st. I think what I understood the city manager to say is that he's not going to present that budget line by line, but it's a budget of the total of each department, and then it's a total budget. I may not be explaining it that well, but am I getting close, city manager? Because we don't get the budget that we've been looking at for the last month and a half, right?
That's correct. The budget resolution that council adopts, much like a lot of other communities, is a fund-based budget resolution that deals with the higher level and outlines total department expenditure, not line item expenditure, from both the revenue and expenditure side for each fund. And then for the general fund, we have appropriation categories under general government as city council, with the total amount being budgeted for that current year or the proposed year, clerk, attorney, manager, on down through all the departments. That's the budget resolution that has been adopted by council. I know since I was with the city in 2000, and I know other communities across the Commonwealth adopt the same type of budget resolution. It's not a line item budget resolution. It is a fund-based budget resolution that gets adopted, which then allows the individual department head to be able to move money if they have an issue within their budget during the year.
Right.
Okay. Now, let me just ask a question, and I don't even know if this is possible, but we have this miscellaneous fund that you gave us today, broken down by departments. And Mr. Perry says he can, in the next couple of weeks, he can eliminate that by getting each department to tell him the breakout and get line items to put it in the line item budget. Is there any way we could see those miscellaneous and how each department maybe broke those figures out? That way we would know how to look at it on the budget. And
It's in,
Yes, ma'am. I think we could certainly do that for you. I mean, when we load the budget and then provide council a clean copy of your annual budget, it would be reflective there because miscellaneous would be eliminated. But if we needed to have kind of a breakout sheet that said, for the Department of Development, the 40,000 that was in miscellaneous is now been put in grass cutting. We can do that.
I think that would help us. Then, like Councilor Pelham said, she doesn't know where they're all going. That way we could see where how those expenses are being broken down and where we can find them in the budget.
So Counselor Denton, I don't know if you're able to view my screen where you are.
That's it.
Okay, so this is what, I'm not trying to speak for Mr. Altman. If I'm incorrect, let me know, or Ms. Robinson. This is last year's budget. And so what Mr. Altman is saying, we do it by fund. So we say all, like you said, all of the amount for that particular department. And that's how we have historically adopted our budget. So it's just lump sum money.
Right.
Council doesn't approve, like historically hasn't approved the actual line items, even though we talk about them.
Right.
But
I understand all that.
Ms. Robinson, okay, so but I think Ms. Robinson is saying we're supposed to show a little bit more when we adopt the budget, and that's also what she's seen in other communities. And so I guess I'm not putting words in Ms. Robinson's mouth. Is that correct, Ms. Robinson? I guess it provides the opportunity to say this is what council actually adopted and it's clear versus being able to be changed. And so if we were to adopt miscellaneous and do it as a fund and then come back and allow them to break it out, that kind of goes against the code section and actually what we physically adopted. And I think that's where the trouble comes in at, because that's not what we adopt. And that's what they will be using to spend money off of. I think that's what we're trying to fix. Is that right, Ms. Robinson?
Mayor Gore, can I help out, because you all are using terms and moving into another realm that is complicating things. First of all, there's no miscellaneous.
Let me get the city attorney's response to my question first, then you can comment. I just want to make sure I'm correct.
Okay, so I understand what the city manager is saying, but those resolutions adopting the budget usually have some language in them which incorporates these line items that you all have spent discussing over the past month. So while it may not show up in the actual body of the resolution, there is a reference to those itemizations which make them a part of your budget. That is what I'm saying. And I'm saying, and based on that, my position is the same relative to whether administratively a section that was called miscellaneous can be broken out to a different line item after council formally adopts the budget. And in the context of other statements that have been made, it wouldn't make much sense when we're talking about directors having the authority to transfer monies between certain line items within their budget. I mean, at some point, a line is funded. And it has to be funded with the specific amount. Otherwise, there would be no need to transfer money. You would just spend it as to where it needed to be spent during the course of your fiscal year. So I understand that you might not have the detailed expenditures set forth in your resolution, but in every resolution that I've seen, there is a reference to the itemization of the different department budgets that I think incorporates that into the budget, and it's in line with what I'm reading in the code. So that's just my statement on it. However you all have done it in the past, if council feels comfortable with that, so be it. Thank
Thank you, Mr. Terry.
I don't have any comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Denton, you still had the floor, and then Councilor Randolph.
I'm done.
Okay, Councilor Randolph.
Well, I certainly would think that had we done this wrong for so many years, one of the auditing groups would have said something to us about it, but that's just me. They've said everything about everything else we've done. So I wanted to bring up one point that I think I heard Mr. Terry say, just so there's no surprise when our final budget comes to us in July. Because I'm comfortable with the way that we're doing this as a fund balance approval. And I'm gonna have to say that simply because we've done it for so long, and that doesn't make it right. But I know that other localities are doing it like this as well. So maybe it's something we should get off of tonight and research some more in the next few days. But Mr. Terry, I think I heard you say that because of the Munis software, that miscellaneous would still show up as a line item, but it would be zeroed out. In other words, it would never, from this point forward in any future budgets, there would never be any amount of money put into miscellaneous. It would always appear as a zero. But that was because the software does or does not allow you to take it out as a line item. Is that correct, or did I mishear you?
That's the best of my understanding. If you look back at the finance accounting budget, you'll see that there is somewhere in there miscellaneous, but after I took over, you'll see that there's no activity there, actual or nothing, because we haven't used it. At some point, hopefully that it'll just totally drop off.
Yes.
But that's what
Yeah.
you're speaking of. And
Yeah, I
if you
think
will
so,
allow me,
because in the software, we use a different software at the bank, the auditors do, but that's what
Right.
happens with their software. If you stop using a line item, it doesn't allow you to take it out immediately or for the next few years. But eventually,
Yep.
if you quit using it, it does just disappear or drop off. Is that
Yeah.
what Munis does too?
Yeah, to the best of my understanding, and I'll verify that, but over time it will just, it's called a trend, it's a historical trend.
Yes, sir.
Where you
And
can
it's
see
for
it.
a reason, yeah, so we can see historically what happened, and I'm
Correct.
familiar with that. So I just want to make clear to the rest of council, we will still see the miscellaneous line item, but there will be no money in it.
Right.
That
Correct.
line item for miscellaneous will not allow Mr. Terry or his staff to delete that whole line item because we've been using it historically. But what he's saying is that the money that is now in miscellaneous, he will be taking that money out and putting it into the actual expense line items for where the departments who were putting money into miscellaneous, like Tavia told us, for demolitions, for housing, he will take that amount that she has allotted in miscellaneous and actually put a line item for demolition and put that amount of money under that line item. Miscellaneous will still be there, but it'll have no money in it. And I didn't want us to assume it was going to just totally disappear, because usually with accounting software, that's not what happens. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear on that. Okay. And Ms. Pelham, the auditors, they do see this because our budget every year starts with our approval, and they're going to look to make sure that council approved a budget and what that fund balance was. So they do see what we approved. and then they
don't
go
look at the
from
line
there.
items though. They don't look at the
No,
line.
they don't look at line items,
that's
but
what-
if
but-
they were needing to have line
Uh,
items based on law, they would know that. And
no,
I
they
would
wouldn't.
think that they would call us on
No, they
that.
wouldn't.
That's just my opinion. I'm not going to argue with you while I have the floor. I'm just saying that's my opinion. Okay? So I hope I made the miscellaneous thing clear for everybody on council so that we don't expect it to be totally erased, but it will be zeroed out. Thank you, Mr. Terry.
Yes, and I
I'm-
have one other comment to
I'm
the
through.
body
Yep.
that Mrs. Randolph has made, and the whole issue is, and even the attorney, it goes back to the attorney and the city manager. The budgets that have been approved, one of the first things that the auditors do is
Yep.
they ask for a copy of the budget resolution.
Yep.
And we do not have a line item in the terms that is being defined now in this conversation. It's a fund-based budget resolution. And that's what the auditors go to, and they look at that. They also are auditors who audit in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So as far back as I can look, 2000 up to now, this is the budget that you all have passed. And when they come in, they test it, and they're still testing it against the Code of Virginia. So the fund-based approval is what we have. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that.
Mm-hmm.
That's for when we get the audits caught up, correct? Because we're on
No,
FY 18. So they're gonna do that for the current year audit? Well, that only gets
yeah.
done when we get caught up with our audits. Right now, we're behind.
No, what I'm saying is whether we're behind or whether we're ahead, when auditors come in, I don't care where they are, Chesterfield, Henrico, whatever, they get a copy of the budget resolution passed by council or supervisor. And they look at that to see whether or not that was loaded according to how it was approved. And in our case, for the last 10 or 15 years, or even whatever you want to use,
Years.
we have passed the budget not by line item, but by fund. And that's what they come in and look at. So I just want to make sure everybody's understanding that the terminology being used to define things, from fund accounting standpoint, we have a fund-based budget. And that's what the resolution, and that's what we load in, and that's what's tested. What you're looking at that Mrs. Denton mentioned is you are going through a line item review, but that is not a line item fund approved that we've done in the past. So I just want to make sure that's clear, because there seems to be a lot of lack of clarity. So I just want to help out everybody.
Councilor Pelham? Councilor
Yeah.
Councilor Denton,
And
you
I
have
would-
your
I-
hand
and I-
raised still.
And back to my point, Counselor, to Randolph particularly, isn't this the point that we went through all these 3 months of 2 meetings a week and all that to tighten up the budget? And then y'all come back tonight and don't want to know anything. So if you want to tighten it up or you don't. And so now we're saying that we're going back to basically what he just said, everybody gonna go back to spending as they normally do. But
Nobody said that.
so anyway, so just because we've done something for 101 years the wrong way is nothing right. It doesn't make it wrong to try to get it right in the 101st year. 100 years wrong. When you have knowledge, you act appropriately. When you don't, you can't. You trust the people that present to you. So now, if we either gonna tighten up on the budget to know more, or we just gonna keep doing what we normally do. But like I said in my message, maybe when Muni Code comes on and everything's accountable, and we start getting every check that the city makes every month in our reports before we come to council, then we'll become more knowledgeable about the budget on a monthly basis versus waiting till January or March, in this case, this year, waiting to March to get started on the budget, first of all. So every year we make the petition or request to start early and we end up starting late. So maybe things will get better. That's all I have.
For those joining via phone, does anyone have any comments? Okay, Councilor Randolph, I do have a comment before I do this next? Okay. I'll just share that, just want to remind council as well that the budget, the responsibility and the authority to adopt the city budget falls on the governing body, which is council. And the budget needs to be prepared however way council sees fit. And so if there is an adjustment, that's the discretion of council to make and direct that. I really thought that this would try to find common ground and go back to what council had been saying ever since we started this process. And I will just share that I'll go back to the original comment that I made. If staff is saying now that we have clarity that they're saying that they could divide this out, and Mr. Terry is saying he could have that done at the start of the next fiscal year, which is July, why don't we hold miscellaneous funds until we get to see the itemization and then approve that portion of the budget and not tie up everything else? And so then we'll get the clarity that we say that we want. It'll be broken down and we'll be compliant with the law and not having it broke down after we have adopted it. And it addresses all the concerns. And I recommended this early on so that way we can just agree, support miscellaneous, but make sure it is laid out in the manner that we anticipate it being, and then we'd go about it appropriately. That's the only suggestion I have. Again, I can't make motions, so I can't make a motion to suggest that we just hold this section until we get the actual dropout of the line items and approve it, so that way we are compliant.
What's the motion on the floor?
It's Ms. Brown.
There isn't one.
It's the one, no, Councilor Palmer, you made the motion, I
I'm
seconded
saying
it.
is that the same motion on the floor?
Yes, Ms. Brown,
Okay.
can you repeat the motion?
I know what it is. I know.
Okay, okay.
No, go ahead, repeat it.
Question?
Ms. Brown, can you repeat the motion?
I was repeating it on mute. My apologies. The motion on the floor is to put all of the departmental miscellaneous line items into one line item in City Council's budget for departments to require funding from council.
Can I make an amendment to that motion?
Yes, what's your amendment?
I mean, if it's to say instead of for council approval until, 'cause I still don't believe they can do it. Those miscellaneous items are identified by item in the budget for fiscal year 22.
Can you repeat that, Councilor Powell? Until miscellaneous.
Until the miscellaneous items are identified by a title in the fiscal year 22 budget.
Would you say itemized or identified?
Either
She
way,
said
itemized or
identified.
identified in the budget by line item so that we know what it's used for.
Okay.
Until that
accept-
can be done, and if it's done July the 1st, fine. But,
I accept the friendly amendment. Councilor Randolph,
I'm sorry, what?
you have your hand raised.
Oh, I thought you were asking me about a friendly amendment. I was like, what?
Oh,
No, there was, what was I gonna say? Oh, unfortunately, I feel like I'm being accused of not wanting transparency and not tightening up the budget simply
Yeah.
because I don't believe that we need to put something in a large fund. Mayor Gore, I like your suggestion of the getting it done, but the city manager and the city finance director have assured us that it is going to be done by July. I understand that there is a concern between what the legal aspect is and what we've allowed ourselves to do, and whether that, excuse me, whether or not that is allowable or not. And so my suggestion is before Tuesday, if council is amenable to it, that the city attorney maybe talk to the auditors and that are here or are working on, or not here physically, but are working on our current 2018 and find out if there is an issue that we can rectify or needs to be rectified. Otherwise, we get to Tuesday night and we do what we feel is appropriate based on that conversation. I don't want to assume anything. I certainly understand probably budgeting fairly well, but I don't want anybody to assume, especially me. But I'm not going to fly around screaming the sky is falling if I don't think it is. So the best methodology that I have is to get the city attorney who seemingly has a disagreement based on the law with what we're actually doing, to work with Mr. Terry, the city manager, and the auditors, and try and resolve this in the next 3 days. Based on all their input to the auditors and the auditors' input back to all three of them, so they all hear the same thing and can all try and understand whether or not what we're doing is appropriate. So I would ask council to consider that at some point tonight. If I have to make a motion, fine. But if we can take a friendly poll and see if that's where anybody wants to go, I'm up for that. But I certainly want this to be a transparent budget. I have wanted, as of last year and this year, to cut this budget, and we're doing it this year. And Ms. Pelham, you know, I've only been on council now for 2 budget sessions. You've been on council for a lot longer. And the concern about the budget, I guess, it has grown with your tenure on council, because you've had opportunity prior to now to do this with previous budgets. So I'll just say that we're willing to work with you, but I'm not willing to, you know, go off the deep end either. It has to be reasonable, and it has to be something that can be worked through. So that's my suggestion, is if we're uncomfortable about who's right and who's wrong on what we're doing on a fund balance approval basis versus a line item approval basis, then why don't we task the 3 people that work for us to talk to the auditors and get consensus by Friday, or no later than Tuesday for us, or Monday, I'd say, because we need to know that before Tuesday. That's just my
Councilor
suggestion.
Randolph, I have a
Yes, ma'am.
question. Do you mind if I ask you a question?
No, that's fine, absolutely.
Okay, I'm only asking because you mentioned earlier on, you said you said what I was trying to do. And I just wrote down some notes. And so I've been on council for a long time too. And as I tried to allude earlier in previous work sessions, we've asked for this for years and it has never been done. So we never had the support in order to be able to make these changes. So that's why it hasn't been implemented yet, not for lack of effort or being vocal about it. I think my concern is, if Mr. Terry said that he could do this in July, we say that we want it done, why won't we just vote to make it official and just move on? If he says he can do it, it satisfies what Ms. Robinson is saying, and is what we say that we want to do, then I don't understand why we just haven't taken action to instill the deal and then just move forward, and then they work on actually doing what they assured could be done. And the only reason why I'm saying that is because if we're referencing the audit, the past few audits that we've received said there's been issues with our financial management and issues with budget transfers and expenditures. And so if the audit is going to be a reference, 1, we're behind, we haven't even had it, we're not even current, but then 2, the audit speaks to needing to have these things resolved in terms of accountability and making sure that everything is clear. So I guess my question is, I promise you, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying, if we're on the, why can't we just vote and just move on?
Let's vote.
Here's why, in my understanding of what has been said, and I could be very well be wrong, but when we vote next Tuesday, Mr. Terry would have to have that all done by Tuesday in order for it to meet the requirements that the city attorney says she believes we need to meet. I don't know that he can get that done in 4 days versus 2 weeks.
Well, why don't
So
we ask Mr. Terry if he can get it done before the 1st, and we can see if we can do a
sure,
meeting.
go ahead, if he thinks he can.
Yeah, Mr. Terry, I see what Councilor Randolph's concern is as a hard date on the 23rd that we have in our budget planning. But do you think it's possible that you can have this accomplished before the 1st, and then we can vote on the budget then and meet everyone's concerns?
Not the 1st, by the 23rd.
No, I'm saying the 23rd is too soon. Is there a reasonable date past that he can get it accomplished so that way we can adjust our budget calendar and adopt it?
And we vote on it on a later date than the 23rd?
Yeah, it just has to be adopted by the 1st, but I don't know what Mr. Terry needs in terms of time to put it into munis.
Right.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Mr. Terry?
I'm concerned because now there's more. This is just one small line item that we're talking about. We're talking about the entire budget for all funds for the entire city. I need 2 weeks, as well as we're still working on CAFRs to get everything done. So my original statement is that by the time we load it into for July for fiscal year FY21, as long as I know what council has adopted and approved in the resolution, that was what I was saying.
Yeah.
Now we're introducing things that I can tell you is really unreasonable because there's a lot of preparation that we have to do. I'm sure Cassette is listening to us. Month end close, year end close, all to get the budget loaded, closing POs and everything. And we only got about 14 more days. So this one little line item, there was big dollar amount. If I take a whole 174 million, it's a tremendous effort. So I can assure you that whatever you pass, when we load the budget like we have done for the last 2 budgets, whatever council says by fund, which is the fund budget resolution, we can print it out. We always do if we want to make it available to you, and you can go down line by line and see what the entire general fund is by department. And that's what we will do. And in this case, 0 field for miscellaneous is what I know we can do.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Randolph. You still have the floor.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about. Trying to get that all done. Mr. City Manager,
Yes, ma'am.
could you contact you and the city attorney contact the auditors tomorrow? And you and Ms. Robinson talk to them about her concerns and potentially, because I know some on council are not comfortable with that issue that Ms. Robinson has raised. Would that be something that you could get accomplished possibly tomorrow or attempt to?
We could certainly attempt to. I mean, we can make the call. Whether we get the comment back from the auditor, I don't know.
And
Okay.
Ms. Robinson, I think she had her hand raised, but I'm not. I thought I saw her hand, but I'm sorry. I thought I saw her hand.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes,
did you commit to getting with the city manager and attempting to call the auditors to talk to them tomorrow about your concerns?
well, my concern had less to do with how it was interpreted by auditors than to make sure city council understood how I was reading the code. And based on the city managers and the finance directors representations that this is not, you don't do line item budgets here. My primary concern, I guess, is addressed to some extent by that, whether I agree that that's a, great or is in conformance with these code sections that I've read, I think is beside the point at this point. My original concern was taking money that I thought would be
I
appropriate.
understand. Yes, and I understand. I don't mean to cut you off, but
That was,
We certainly understand your, the miscellaneous changing after we've done the resolution.
and so whether,
Um,
my point is though, whether it's
Yeah, Ms.
the auditor or
Robinson, go ahead.
my opinion on the code sections, it would just simply be that that's okay and we move forward. So I'm not really sure if that conversation is necessary. I'm certainly willing to do it, but I'm not going to have the opinion driven by the auditors. It would be simply that it's not a problem that rises to the level where it has a material impact on how they are viewing the city's financial records. And
okay. Well, if it's not the auditors that are gonna help you, what about one of the other city attorneys in a locality that is doing it the same way? Would that help you to work through it, the issue with another city attorney? Whether, you know, with you all bouncing off of each other, your interpretations of the law? I'm not saying it will change your mind, but it might at least give you something else to look at or them something else to look at.
again, well, I would like to give you a straight yes or no, but it's the problem seems to have escalated beyond where my initial concern was, which was what I was viewing as perhaps an appropriation being handled administratively by staff, which I don't view can be done. In the context of their explanation that you don't adopt line item budgets, then there isn't an appropriation per se. It's merely a transferring, arguably between lines that might not exist at the time of adoption, but lines that were created later on, but there are no extra monies being actually plugged into that budget.
Right. So you still have a problem with that
Based
after
on
the fact? Because
is
that's what I thought we were working on.
Ms. Counselor Randolph, I can't hear Ms. Robinson when she's speaking. Can you give her 1 second to finish her explanation, please?
Well, I was trying to ask her a question to
No,
clarify.
I understand, but she was in the middle of speaking, just the same way I did Counselor Pelham when she was doing that to March. I'm just asking to let her finish her sentence. Go ahead, Ms. Robinson. Your line is muted.
Hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. A discussion with an auditor isn't going to assuage the concerns that I've expressed. Because I see these issues on two different tracks. I'm happy to talk with them. It has nothing to do with whether or not they're processing the paperwork or able to process their paperwork without it having some kind of material finding against the city. My concern has been primarily addressed by the statements made by the finance director and Mr. City Manager relative to how we adopt our budget. Whether or not I think that, you know, is in line with what I've seen in my experience, primarily in the code, that's a separate consideration. But the concern that was the primary driver for my injecting myself in the conversation was to make sure that there would be no appropriation that was done administratively. And now I'm satisfied that there will not be an appropriation done administratively.
Okay, so you have no issue now?
I don't have an issue worthy enough to delay the finance director in finishing up what he needs to get done so we can adopt a budget by July 1.
Okay, so if we don't have the changes to miscellaneous by the time we adopt the resolution on Tuesday, and then Mr. Terry makes those changes for the final printed line item budget for council and and for posterity to go on our website, you do not have the concern that you had voiced earlier. You're okay with that?
Ms.
So
Robinson, you're muted.
I'm assuming there will not be a line item budget placed on your website when we have decided not to, our representation is, we don't adopt a line item budget. So it's either incorporated by reference, so it has the effect of a budget, or it does not. So we either go with the resolution with the broad categories of funds that has been represented, or we get back to the
Robinson, you kind of went in and out. You said, so we do what?
She's gone.
I'm here. I'm just trying to figure out where I went out. I have a microphone.
Okay, sorry, you said, I last heard you say something about representation, then you kind of left, you kind of went out.
Okay, so the question, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the representation is that there will be a line item budget placed onto the website. That doesn't quite comport with adopting something other than a line item budget. So maybe that's confusing the issue, and perhaps we'll just keep that statement out. But if we pass something that is not a line item budget, my concern about a quote administrative appropriation is resolved. If on the back end of this, what we have basically done in substance is adopted a budget resolution with summary information that's in there, but we've incorporated somehow without clearly referencing that in the resolution, this line item budget, then there's a problem. So kind of staying where we are and where we will be is important to the conversation. As long as there's a line item being presented publicly, a line item budget, and we're saying this is our budget which we adopted, then my original concerns will resurface. If we keep it as described by the finance manager, the finance director and the city manager, I don't have those concerns. So that's the best I can give you with the information.
Okay, thank you. Mr. City Manager, did you understand that and understand what we need to put on the website based on that?
So we don't do administrative appropriations of funds. So what we would be doing is council would adopt the budget, the departmental budget in the resolution is shown as the total. And then we just eliminate, zero out the miscellaneous line, create the new object coded line and move those monies to there. We're not appropriating any additional funding. We're just moving one monies from one line item to another line item. What we publish on the web page is the budget book that has the line item budgets, but what we adopt to adopt the budget resolution is done by fund. And I'd be happy to share a copy of that.
Robinson, you have your hand raised.
God.
I forgot to lower it, ma'am. I've lowered it.
Okay, Councilor Randolph, you still have the floor.
I'm not sure I want it anymore. Okay, I think we've worked through that issue. I mean, I tried my best to hear what everybody on council was saying, what they were comfortable with and what they weren't, and trying to figure out what we could do to get us there. But I guess it appears that we're going to try and approve a resolution on Tuesday night for the entire budget after we have another meeting Thursday night to vote on different aspects. We've made some votes tonight. We've got to vote on Mrs. Pelham's outstanding motion, Councilor Pelham's outstanding motion. And once we vote on the resolution of the fund balance, then there will be changes made to get rid of miscellaneous and put it into line items so we don't have to look at miscellaneous amounts. I can say that if I see any department using miscellaneous from here, or from this budget forward, I will tell the city manager that we will just take that money and put it into somewhere else. So if they use it, they're going to lose it.
Councilor Randolph, you know, this goes back to when council voted last year to do that finance software, the open finance. all of
Yep.
this stuff will be electronic and will be posted on the website as soon as we adopt it, and people will be able to see the breakdown of all of this if we, because council approved open finance in November, we were told that they were working on it. So when we have that conversation later on, to reaffirm that vote, all of this would be electronic and people can click through it and actually see what we're talking about. So for the public that's watching, we're moving in that direction to try to get more transparent software so you don't have to flip through a PDF book and you can see what we're saying and see the breakdown of miscellaneous at your fingertips. Thank you, Councilor Randolph, for that and trying to get some resolution. Councilor Denton?
The only thing I would add is that to those listening, the budget book will be put on the website. This will be transparent for everyone to look at. And it's just the resolution that we're lumping sums together for the department. So I want to those that are listening, we want this to be as transparent as possible, and they will know where all this money is going to. Thank you.
You're welcome. But point of clarification, they won't see the breakdown because I think that's the point that when Councilor Randolph was trying to get clarity on, I think that's why it kind of circled back to where we started at point A. If we were to put the itemized line items on the website, that would just be redundant and not proper because we didn't do a itemized budget. So what will be on the website will be the resolution by fund.
Yeah,
and not the breakdown.
To the library, there is always a full budget there by line item for but the book is there, and anybody can go there that is concerned. So it is transparent.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Councilor Randolph?
I call for the vote on Ms. Pelham's motion, please.
Okay, and Madam Clerk, can you please repeat the motion that's on the floor as it is now? And if you're speaking, you're muted.
The motion on the floor is to put all of the departmental miscellaneous line items into one line item in City Council's budget for departments that require funding from council, with the amendment from Councilor Pelham until miscellaneous items are identified in the fiscal year 21 budget.
Thank you very much. There's no objections to calling for the vote that I heard. Please proceed with the roll call.
Mayor Gore?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Bennett?
No.
Councilor Randolph?
No.
Councilor Holloway?
Yes.
Councilor Parton?
No.
Councilor Denton?
No.
Councilor Pelham?
Councilor Pelham, you're muted.
Yes, yes.
Okay, we heard you. Motion fails. So we are still on this topic of discussion. Again, we don't have to take action if it's not needed. We can move to the next section unless someone else has another motion. Councilor Randolph?
I'd like to make a motion that we delete the miscellaneous line item in its entirety, since there's nothing that it's really tied to specifically in council's budget and also in the clerk's budget.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Randolph and seconded by Councilor Denton. We're now in discussion. I have a question for City Manager. We asked early on in this budget process to get a breakdown of what our miscellaneous was spent on. And then we had a work session yesterday, and last week, we asked for that information too. Is that incorporated in this packet? Because I know we pay for items for council out of miscellaneous, that's for operations.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I was muted.
It's okay.
I don't see it in here, but we can, I can't I know I can't get into council's budget and do a printout of expenditures. So we could get you a printout of your expenditures and send them forward to you tomorrow for council's consideration.
Okay.
It don't matter.
Counselor Randolph.
Yes, ma'am.
I am it first.
Okay, I'm sorry. Counselor Pelham and then Counselor Randolph, unless I had that wrong.
No, I'm good. I don't have a question.
Okay.
Yes, I would like to make is an amendment to that motion to include miscellaneous deletion for the city council, clerk, city manager, economic development, office on youth, whatever Mr. Bragg's budget is, anything that comes under administration, include that as to drop that as well.
Can
One
we
moment.
say administration,
Whatever it comes under your office directly.
just the city manager's office?
No, city manager, assistant city manager.
Right.
The administration is all three offices. It's the clerk, the city attorney, and the city manager.
I'm not talking about them three. I'm talking about city manager, assistant city manager, whatever them are, comes under his organizational chart, not besides it, the other major departments.
That's what I wanted clarity on. You're not talking about development and police and fire. You're just talking.
I'm talking about whatever
Manager's
Mr.
office.
Dane is over. What's that
Look
called? Economic
Look at
development.
the budget miscellaneous and those line items are there, Ms. Pelham.
Say again.
In the stuff we were handed out tonight, there's a little chart for budget miscellaneous and it covers the economic
I didn't look
development.
at that report. I told you I didn't get home to 5:30. I did not get through that whole report. It wasn't sent out in time. So I'm just saying to eliminate it. I don't know what's in it. If you eliminate the city council, you eliminate assistant city managers.
Well, so the city manager's budget is everything inclusive in the city manager's budget.
Miscellaneous.
Correct.
So tell me, because I didn't get the report
We
in
have
time.
Mr. Bragg has $3,000 in his budget for miscellaneous, and I believe when we had our budget work session, which was the first night, he explained that he uses those items to help with marketing of different things that may come up during the year. And this year we're helping use those
Exclude
funds
him.
to help
Okay.
with Juneteenth. We have the economic development. We've shown on the page, the second page, there's $25,000 in miscellaneous. Of that, 10 is essential. So there's 15,000 that's available.
What's the essential for? It was 25 in there when we talked about it.
And yes, ma'am, there's $25,000 in there in the
Mhm.
miscellaneous account. We use the miscellaneous account to handle things like advertisements for economic development, which we typically don't do. The grand opening plaques that we do for businesses when they open, impromptu events like when we've done the state championship celebration for the football team on the steps, when we did the Little League World Series celebration on the front steps, when we've done our film premieres, any outside contract services that have been unplanned with regard to potential, in the past, any attorney's fees that we may need, or if we've done photography for an event or a brochure. So those are the types of things.
I think that's essential.
And
But my question is, why would you have money in there for attorney fees when you have a city attorney that can answer mostly 99% of your questions that you have?
Counselor Pelham and Mr. Altman, just one moment. Counselor Pelham, I know you have the floor. I'll go back to you. But when we started this work session, we all agreed that we just got this information and that we would go back and look over it and ask questions for follow-up.
Okay,
Counselor Randolph, would you be amenable to saying, can you wait until we get the information from council and the clerk's budget miscellaneous to see what is actually needed before we just zero out the whole line, just like we're waiting for the other departments to answer back, Mr. Altman?
May I just clarify? The only, yes, and I will be amenable to that. But the only reason I did the clerk's office and council was because, as I indicated to you all, the budget that was sent to us back in February for both those offices by the clerk at that time. After she left, I called her and talked to her about each line item, made notes, and her indication to me was that the miscellaneous was not for anything in particular in our budget and hers, except for just as a catch-all, which is true miscellaneous. There were not any items specific to those if per her. So that's why I felt comfortable zeroing out both of those, but I will still wait if that's the will of council.
Does council have any objections until we get everyone's miscellaneous? I know we had 3 departments. If I'm going back in my mind, but I know we have some outstanding information that we're waiting for. Is everyone amenable to waiting to get that information and to revisit this at our next work session that we're planning to have discussions on? I should say, does anyone
I'm fine
object
with
to
it
that?
if the majority wants to do that.
Is anyone object to doing that, I should ask? Okay, no one said they objected, so Councilor Randolph, if you're willing to pull back
That's
that
fine.
motion.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Thank you so much. And Councilor Pelham, can you please, look over this whenever you have time, since we just got it, and then just follow up with Mr. Altman on your questions. So when we meet again next time, we'll be able to really hammer these out. Is everyone okay with that? Okay.
Yeah, you can print it and put it in my box. I'll pick it up. I don't
Okay.
look at it.
Mr.
on-
Altman, just and Ms. Brown, just make sure we get hard copies in our mailboxes if they're not already there.
I don't need one. I have mine.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Mine is Councilor Randolph's. Thank you. So, Mr. Altman, what's the next section in your presentation? We talked about travel, we talked about miscellaneous, so now we're on outside agencies, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Council had requested all the letters from the outside agencies requesting funding, so they're in your packet this evening for review. And then, obviously, I don't know that y'all will go through them line by line tonight. You probably want to review them. And then in your packet, at the end is the information that we provided you at your last budget meeting. One item in there is we did have the city Commonwealth attorney who indicated that he needed to have an attorney position for to deal with body cam footage review. So the sheet that he submitted with regard to the needs for that is in your packet behind all the letters of request. The last letter of request being from Virginia's Gateway region. And then there's,
Thank you for that, because I didn't know when to stop. Okay.
the next sheet is the city attorney's budget request for the position that he had indicated that he needed. And then after that is the information that we provided to council at your last work session, answering questions dating back to the May 7th, the May 19th, 21st, June 4th, work sessions, and then also a copy of the personnel policy. I think Councilor Pelham had asked for that at one of our work sessions when we talked about the tuition reimbursement. So that's the personnel policies in there. And I think we had provided that in a previous packet also, but these answer your questions dating back to the May 7th work session moving forward. And at the May 7th, as Mr. Terry had indicated, when we were talking about, Councilor Pelham had asked about the clerk position. That question is answered in this back piece of information. It's one of the questions, the big question that was raised at the May 21st meeting. So those are all the questions that council asked. I included it this evening because I wasn't sure if it would be readily available to anyone since we sent it out at the last meeting. So I'll put it in your packet this evening as well.
And Mr. Altman, if when we look over this, if we see that maybe one of our questions isn't included in here, we just email you to try to get the information out to council.
Absolutely. Yeah. If I've overlooked something, going back through my notes, please let me know, so we can get that, that answer for you. Absolutely.
Thank you. Counselor Pelham,
What you call my name for?
you have your hand raised.
Let me lower it.
All right. So council, at the end of the packet, as Mr. Altman stated, is the answers to some of our questions. If when you look over this, if you see a question that's omitted, can you please copy all and send it to Mr. Altman so we're all aware that you're waiting for that information. And then when Mr. Altman gets it, he'll copy all of council with the response. And that way we can at least make sure that we're all cognizant of what's outstanding before our next work session. Does anyone else have any questions about what Mr. Altman just covered at the end of this packet? I see no hands raised in the software. Anyone joining us by phone? Okay, Mr. Altman, do you have anything else you want to add for this work session?
Sorry, I was muted. No, ma'am, but I would just encourage everybody to take a look at the material. If you have any questions, please reach out to us and let us know what those questions might be. And again, if there's a question or that was not addressed in these the work session overviews at the end, please let me know and we'll make sure that we get that information to you. So on Thursday, you can have a discussion and start to whittle down where you want to be with the budget, and we can get a resolution together for your consideration on the 22nd or 23rd, excuse me.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. I don't have anything else with this. I do have a question for council. Since we have 30 minutes left, I'm not trying to delay this any longer. I do want to see if I can get a request to add one other item to the discussion tonight that hopefully will be very, 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 very quick. I did send everyone an email last week regarding another donation that we need council to act on. Is it possible, since we have all 7 of us here, to be able to accept that so Mr. Altman can finish the process?
Would you clarify again?
Yes, ma'am. Last week I sent council an email due to our last conversation we had during a budget work session when there was a mass donation. Council said that they wanted everyone to be aware. So I sent you the email with the letter. Mr. Altman said he was willing to accept the donation and was going to coordinate the delivery. But out of an abundance of caution, we wanted to make sure that council had no, to verify there was no issues with council accepting it. It is just disposable masks, and Mr. Altman was fine with accepting it. We wanted just to make sure everyone was okay. And I did send out that letter and copy all of council asking for feedback. I didn't receive any concerns or saying no's.
I have my hand raised.
I'm sorry, I'm scrolling at the bottom of the screen. Go ahead.
I do have an objection because the last time we did this and one was added, I was late, as some tonight were, and didn't get the information that there had been a change in the agenda. And as most of you know, I don't like to come to meetings unless I am fully aware of what is going on. So with not having any advance information, I am not for amending this agenda at all.
Okay, Councilor Denton, I'll forward you the email I sent out to council last week. I gave you the information in the letter, so I'll forward it to you again.
That's fine.
And can you just respond back to let me know that you received it?
I will.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. Councilor Pelham?
Yeah, I mean, it's a donation from someone giving the city something. Why you have to really make a decision because you don't get it on time? Anyway, I think it's a great thing that people want to give to the city so that city dollars don't have to be used on that. So I would be in support of supporting that so that our taxpayer dollars won't have to be utilized. Instead, a generous contribution has been given. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Counselor Denton, I'm sorry, did someone else have their hand raised?
Yeah, I want to raise my hand. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead. Uh-huh.
Okay, so what I hear you asking for is if we can take a vote tonight on the masks that we've already talked about.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
So,
we didn't,
but
the last
I want to,
time we talked about it, we didn't take a vote because not everybody was there, correct?
no, let me provide clarity. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah.
When we had the last mask conversation, I shared at that time there would be a second donation coming. And in the remarks, councils, there was a debate between if Mr. Altman could sign off on them or did we have to come back to council? And so on an abundance of caution, we were advised to come back to council. And
Yeah.
so I sent out the letter after I talked to Mr. Altman. There was no objections, and so we were going to coordinate the delivery. And so I sent out the letter to council and saying, hey, council, I'm going to ask for support on this. I wanted to just make sure everyone was clear and wasn't caught off guard. And so I'm just revisiting that because I didn't get any feedback back or saying no. So I thought that everyone was okay with it. So
I
that's
got
why.
the email. Let me just clarify for this. The second donation of masks is from a different donor.
Yes,
And those are in, they're in date, correct? If I
yes, ma'am.
remember correctly? Yeah.
They're in date disposable mask.
Yeah. They're not the N95s, but they're just plain old masks.
Yes, ma'am. There's surgical masks that are in date.
I don't have a problem with it either.
Okay, Mr. Altman, you have your hand raised. Thank you, Councilor Randolph.
If I'm not mistaken, because you have everyone here, it takes a majority vote of council to amend the
Right.
agenda.
Right.
And
That's what I was asking for.
Yeah. So just to provide some clarity and some assistance with this matter, the mayor did reach out to me with regard to the donation of the mask by Virginia American Water Company. I called and spoke to the local president here. We talked about it extensively. The masks are not expired, and I have no issues with accepting that donation on behalf of the city.
Yeah.
And so I was just seeing if we could accept it, and so that Mr. Altman can finish the process with the company. And I sent out the letter so everyone would be able to read it and contact us if they had questions. Councilor Denton?
I don't have the letter available. Is this for Ward 4?
Yes, ma'am. This was coordinated by one of my constituents that works at the company. He reached out to me that night of the council meeting, but I didn't have specifics at the time. And I just alluded that another one will be coming down the pipe.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to thank Madam Mayor and the city manager, Mr. Altman, for being proactive in this situation with the pandemic and being proactive for the constituents of the city of Hopewell and seeing that they receive masks. Thank you.
Yeah. So I was asking for the ability to accept it, and I can't make motions while I was putting it out to council.
So can I just ask, this isn't for the city as Councilor Holloway, this is for Ward 4. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And again, when I spoke about the other one, I said there was 2. So yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And of the 2, one may be considered for the city of Hopewell, of the batches that you're receiving. You're receiving one for Ward 4. You're receiving one for Ward 4.
They're all for Ward 4.
The donations are because this one I referenced last time was organized by a constituent, and I can't accept it. I have to go through council to accept it.
Yes,
And then the badge that Councilor Holloway is referring to, Mr. Altman's purchase, yes, is for the city.
yes,
That was the first one, yes.
Yes.
thank you.
Councilor Pelham?
Yeah, but this donation will mean that the city will have to purchase less masks, correct? So in essence, you're saving the tax dollars money, whether it's in
Yes.
Ward 4, Ward 1, 2, 3, 10, or whatever. So no brainer. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, would someone like to make a motion?
Make the motion that we accept the donation and gift to Ward 4 for masks.
No,
I
we
think
have
we
to
have to
make the
amend-
motion. Yeah. Amend
To
the-
amend the agenda to accept it.
I make the motion, so move to amend the agenda to make another motion to accept masks.
Second. Any discussion or clarity that needs to be provided? Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Gore,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Counselor Randolph,
Yes.
Counselor Holloway,
Yes,
Counselor Parton,
Yes.
Counselor Denton,
This is for just the vote on it.
No, ma'am,
Amend
it's
the
to
agenda.
amend the agenda.
Okay, you can amend the agenda.
I'm sorry, Counselor Denton, I couldn't hear you.
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Pelham.
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Pelham, the motion, please.
I'd like to make the motion that we accept the gift from, is it the water company?
Yes, ma'am.
Virginia Water Company to donate masks to Ward 4, which in essence donates to the city, to me.
Second. Any other discussion? Counselor Denton?
the only thing I can say is that, again, we're voting on something that I don't have information on. And I said the last time, I would not vote on anything else that is not given to us prior to a meeting. I don't think it's fair. I think we need to, at least to vote on something at a meeting, we need to be informed of that before we come to the meeting. So I can't support it. I'm sorry.
That's fine, Counselor Denton, and I'll forward you the email again. I'm sorry you didn't receive it. I sent it to the city council group email, so we'll double check to see if there was an error with that, but I sent it to the body. So I'll send it to you tonight, right now. while
Why
we're
could
here.
it have been with this agenda? We didn't get it till late today. So I don't understand, but that's okay.
Okay.
That's just where I've always been for 3 years. I like to come to the meetings prepared.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
You voted on other stuff.
What was that? Is that a problem?
I said you voted on other stuff that came to the council. at the
I don't
last
think,
meeting.
not, you find it for me, Council Fellow.
Point of order.
Thank you. And again, with the same thing with this, if there's any elderly or anything, the special groups that need some, please let me know. We'll make sure you get it. Roll call,
Thank
please.
you.
No problem.
Mayor Gore,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Counselor Randolph,
Yes.
Counselor Holloway,
Yes,
Counselor Parton,
Yes.
Counselor Denton,
No,
Counselor Pelham.
Yes,
Thank you very much, Council. And again, I don't know if my dog's barking over that. If you have any elderly or at-risk people that in your ward that need to have something, let me know. We'll deduct it and give it to you. I appreciate it. Any other comments for tonight before we adjourn?
No.
I make a motion the meeting be adjourned.
Okay,
Second.
second by Councilor Randolph. Roll call, please.
Mayor Gore,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Bennett,
Yes.
Counselor Randolph,
Yes.
Counselor Holloway,
Yes.
Counselor Parton,
Yes.
Counselor Denton,
Yes.
Counselor Pelham.
No. Not 9:30, so no.
Good night, everyone. Have a good night. Thank you. Talk to y'all later.
Good night.
Brenda,
Yeah.
Brenda, don't say anything. You're still live.
Oh, I could say something loud. We should have used that extra time to give closing
I
comments.
know, but I don't want you to say anything